Hello, sir. I sincerely appreciate the effort and passion you put into narrating these powerful conversion stories. They have deeply inspired me and helped me in writing my own conversion story, which I am sending exclusively to you. My name is Layla Hamdan, but today I am fondly called Sister Paul in Lebanon. They gave me this name because, just like the Apostle Paul in the Bible, I was once on a mission to destroy Christians when Jesus Christ himself stopped me in my tracks and turned my life upside down. I was born in Raqqa, Syria, in a family where Islam was not just a religion, but our very identity and pride. From the time I could walk and speak, my parents taught me how to pray, how to recite the Quran, and how to honor Allah with every part of my life. My father was a strict man, a respected imam in our local mosque, and he ruled our house with discipline that was as firm as it was loving in his own way. My mother, though gentler, made sure I grew up understanding the importance of modesty, obedience, and sacrifice for the cause of Islam. Women in our culture were expected to stay in the shadows, to support from behind. But even as a little girl, something inside me longed for more. I didn't want to be ordinary, and that desire, though buried, would one day set me on a path of bloodshed I could never have imagined. As I entered my teenage years, the atmosphere in Raqqa began to change. The sounds of daily life, children playing, merchants shouting in the streets, were now mixed with the distant thunder of warplanes and the terrifying blasts of bombs. Foreign powers fought over our lands, and radical groups took advantage of the chaos to rise in power. My father started attending meetings with men who spoke in low tones about jihad, sacrifice, and the defense of Islam. Though I was young, I listened from behind doors, absorbing every word like a sponge. At school, our teachers taught us not only mathematics and science, but also how to hate those they called infidels, the Americans, the Christians, and anyone who dared to oppose Allah's will. They showed us videos of Western armies bombing villages, women and children crying in rubble, and they told us, these are your enemies. Allah will reward you if you fight for justice. At first, I was afraid of such talk, but fear slowly turned into anger, and anger became a deep bitterness that poisoned my young heart. The turning point came when I was 16. One hot afternoon, while I was helping my mother hang clothes to dry, the sound of jets roared overhead. Moments later, an explosion shook the ground. I ran to the street with my heart pounding in my chest, only to find black smoke rising in the distance. Neighbors screamed and ran toward the rubble. I joined them, praying my brother was not near the market where the bombs fell. But as I reached the scene, my worst fear came true. There he was, my older brother Kareem, his lifeless body crushed beneath a fallen wall. I felt my knees buckle as I stared at him, the big brother who once carried me on his shoulders, now still and cold. That day, something inside me snapped. I no longer saw Americans as faceless soldiers in videos. I saw them as monsters who stole my brother, my protector, and my friend. From that day on, I made a vow I would never be weak. I would grow strong enough to fight back. I would make the infidels pay for what they had done. By the time I turned 19, I was ready to act. I began attending secret gatherings of young radicals in Raqqa, most of them men. I was the only woman who dared sit among them. At first, they laughed and told me to go home and tend to my mother's kitchen. But I refused to leave. I told them, do not underestimate me. Allah can use anyone for his cause, even a woman. My defiance surprised them, and eventually one of the commanders decided to test me. He sent me on a small mission to gather intelligence on a Kurdish checkpoint outside the city. I did it with precision and brought back more than they asked for. The men were shocked. From then on, they began to see me differently. I trained with them, learned to handle weapons, plan ambushes, and execute attacks. I showed no fear, and I earned their respect through sheer determination. In a world where women were expected to stay hidden behind veils and walls, I became an exception. I was no longer just Layla Hamdan. I was a rising name among the fighters. They started calling me the Lioness of Raqqa. I led operations that destroyed convoys, planted bombs in enemy camps, and carried out executions of those who betrayed our cause. I recruited and trained other women, not for nursing or spying as was usual, but for combat. I became known as the first woman in our region to lead a battalion of female jihadists. It was a position of both honor and danger, but I embraced it fully. The more blood I shed, the more I felt I was avenging my brother, my people, and my faith. I believed I was doing all as well. Looking back now, it chills me to remember how far I had fallen, how blind I was to the truth. But in those days, I was convinced I was a hero. I stood over villages turned to ash, believing I was serving God. I heard the screams of terrified families and thought I was bringing justice. My heart was stone, my hands soaked in the blood of Christians, Kurds, and anyone I saw as an enemy. I didn't realize I had become the very monster I once feared. I was fearless, ruthless, and zealous. I believed nothing and no one could stand in my way. I didn't know then that my story was far from over, that I was about to face the greatest mission of my life, a mission that would not end in blood, but in the encounter that would change my eternity. As I prepared for yet another mission, one aimed at wiping out a group of armed Christians in a small Syrian town, I made a vow to myself. I would finish what others had failed to do. I would crush these infidels completely. And so, with fire in my heart and hatred in my soul, I set out on the journey that I thought would bring glory to Allah. I had no idea it would be the journey that would bring me to my knees before Jesus Christ. When I think back to those days, it feels like I'm watching someone else's life, like a nightmare I once called reality. After that mission to crush the Christian militia in Al-Qaryatayn, I began to take on a new role among my fellow jihadists. The explosion that killed most of my team left me with burns and injuries, but I survived and returned to Raqqa more determined than ever. For the men who doubted me, my survival became proof that Allah's favor was upon me. They whispered that I had the spirit of a warrior and that no ordinary woman could endure such trials. I had tasted blood and fire, and instead of breaking me, it hardened me. I started training harder, studying tactics from older commanders, and surprising them with strategies they never expected from a woman. Soon, they could no longer deny my place at the table where real decisions were made. My rise among the ranks was not without resistance. Many of the male commanders were furious that a woman dared to speak in their councils, let alone lead missions. They believed women should be in the background, cooking, spying, or nursing the wounded, not holding rifles or plotting ambushes. But I challenged them openly. I reminded them of stories from Islamic history, where women like Khalid bin al-Azwar fought alongside men. My knowledge of the Quran and Hadith became my weapon in arguments, and they had no choice but to listen. Eventually, I was assigned my first independent operation, to locate and execute 3 defectors who had betrayed ISIS by giving intelligence to Western forces. I tracked them across the desert, cornered them in an abandoned farmhouse near Deir ez-Zor, and carried out the executions with my own hands. As their lifeless bodies fell to the ground, I felt no regret, only a cold satisfaction that I was becoming who I was meant to be. From that moment, I was no longer just another fighter. I began leading small squads into battle, and my strategies worked where others had failed. During one raid against Kurdish forces near Kobani, my team outmaneuvered their patrols using surprise attacks at night, leaving their stronghold in ruins. We seized weapons, destroyed supply lines, and left no survivors. Each victory brought me greater respect for my comrades, but it also fueled a darker pride within me. I saw myself as Allah's instrument, a lioness among jackals, and nothing seemed impossible. It was not long before I was put in charge of planning attacks on Christian villages suspected of aiding Kurdish resistance. My orders were clear. Leave no one alive who refuses to submit to the caliphate. The stories of what we did still haunt my dreams. In one village near Hasaka, we stormed the homes of Christians before dawn. I can still hear the screams of women and children as we dragged men into the streets. We lined them up and gave them a choice, convert or die. Some begged for mercy. Others whispered prayers to Jesus as bullets ended their lives. I ordered the destruction of their church, and when our explosives reduced it to rubble, I stood in the ashes believing I was serving Allah's justice. Another time, in a crowded market in Mosul, I supervised the planting of car bombs meant to target Western aid workers. When the explosion tore through the street, I watched from a distance as chaos erupted, bodies strewn across the road, blood mixing with dust, and felt no sorrow. My heart had become as hard as stone. With every mission, my reputation grew. Fighters who once mocked me now obeyed my commands without question. They feared my temper and admired my precision. I trained other women to fight, to carry weapons, and to be ready for martyrdom. Soon, I had my own unit of female fighters, a rarity in ISIS. They looked to me as a sister and a leader, and together we carried out operations that earned us the nickname, the She-Wolves. Among the male fighters, whispers spread about my ruthlessness. They said I was more dangerous than 10 men combined. Some feared me, others desired me, all respected me. I began to enjoy the power, the influence, and the way even high-ranking imams lowered their voices when I entered a room. Yet, there was a darkness growing inside me that I could not name. The more blood I shed, the emptier I felt when the battles ended. But I pushed those feelings aside, telling myself this was jihad, the highest form of service to Allah. I drowned my doubts in action, planning more raids, more attacks, and more executions. One of my most brutal missions took place in Sinjar, where we captured Yazidi families. I oversaw their separation, men executed, women and children sent into slavery. That night, as I sat in a captured home, my hands still stained with blood, I felt a strange chill in the air. It was as if unseen eyes were watching me, but I dismissed it as fatigue. I had no idea then that this was the beginning of a stirring I could not ignore forever. By the time I turned 24, I had become one of the most feared figures in our ranks. News of my operation spread beyond Syria. Western intelligence gave me the code name the Lioness, but in Raqqa, my own fighters began calling me something else, the Black Widow of Raqqa. They said I brought death wherever I went, that any man who crossed me would meet his end. The name stuck, and I wore it like a crown. I believed I was untouchable, chosen by Allah to lead his holy army. I had no way of knowing that my next mission, the one that would take me to a Christian enclave resisting ISIS rule, would be the very mission that would shatter the world I had built and bring me face to face with the one I had sworn was my enemy. The name Black Widow of Raqqa carried with it both fear and authority. It meant I had no equal among my peers. I wore it proudly as I continued leading operations across Syria and Iraq. But nothing had prepared me for the news that reached our headquarters one sweltering afternoon. One of my lieutenants barged into the room, his face pale beneath his dusty scarf. He handed me a report that made my blood boil. It spoke of a Christian militia in a small village called Al-Qaryatayn, deep in the heart of Syria. They had not only resisted ISIS patrols, but reportedly ambushed and killed 2 of our groups in recent weeks. The Christians were armed, organized, and their defiance had emboldened other villages. They were even spreading hope that ISIS could be resisted. To me, this was blasphemy of the highest order. Christians disrupting jihad, infidels daring to challenge the caliphate. This could not stand. The more I read, the more my fury grew. The report described how these Christians prayed openly in their churches and provided refuge to Muslims fleeing ISIS. They were not afraid of us, and that enraged me more than anything else. I slammed my fist on the table, startling the men around me. "We have tolerated these dogs for too long." I spat, my voice shaking with anger. "They think their Isa can save them? I will show them the power of Allah's army." I ordered my best fighters to assemble immediately. I needed to meet with our regional leaders and plan an operation that would crush these Christians once and for all. I envisioned their churches burning, their weapons seized, and their people either converted or wiped out. In my mind, this was holy work, and I was the chosen instrument to carry it out. My hatred for Christians had reached a boiling point. I thought of them as infidels, traitors, and obstacles to Allah's kingdom on earth. As preparations began, I paced my quarters, unable to sit still. My thoughts swirled with verses from the Quran and speeches from radical imams that spoke of jihad, martyrdom, and the duty to eradicate disbelief. I whispered prayers under my breath, asking Allah to give me strength for the coming battle. My zeal consumed me like fire. I imagined leading my fighters into Al-Qaryatayn, standing over the bodies of those who dared defy us. This was not just another mission for me. This was personal. These Christians were an insult to our cause, and their audacity had to be met with swift and merciless judgment. I convinced myself I was doing Allah's work, even though a small, quiet voice deep inside me began to stir, a voice I quickly silenced. Doubt was weakness, and weakness had no place in my heart. By sunset, my convoy was ready. 5 armored vehicles loaded with weapons and fighters, each man eager to prove his loyalty. I walked among them, my black scarf wrapped tightly around my head, my rifle slung across my chest. Their eyes followed me with a mix of fear and admiration. I was not like other women. I was their commander, and they would follow me to death if I commanded it. Before we departed, I stood atop a battered pickup truck and addressed my fighters. "Brothers," I said, my voice echoing in the dusty courtyard, "today we ride to fulfill Allah's will. The infidels in Al-Qaryatayn believe they are strong, but they have never faced us. They will see that resisting the caliphate is a death sentence." Cheers erupted as I raised my fist. In that moment, I believed I was unstoppable. We set out under the cover of night, our headlights cutting through the darkness of the Syrian desert. The road from Raqqa to Deir ez-Zor was long and treacherous, littered with the scars of war, burnt-out vehicles, collapsed buildings, and the silent reminders of those who had perished. As I sat in the lead vehicle, I stared ahead with a cold determination. My mind replayed the images of past missions, the Christians I had overseen executed, the churches I had ordered destroyed, the villages left in ashes at my command. I told myself this was righteous vengeance. These people had defied Allah's will, and their blood would purify the land. My heart was hard, and my hands were ready. Nothing else mattered. As we neared Deir ez-Zor, the desert stretched endlessly around us, a sea of darkness broken only by the occasional flash of distant artillery. I watched the horizon, silently planning the strategy we would present to the regional commanders. I wanted this operation to be precise and devastating. There would be no room for mercy. Any man, woman, or child who stood in our way would meet the sword. I remembered hearing that this Christian group even sang hymns before battle, praising their God as though he could save them. The thought made me clench my teeth. Their Isa cannot help them, I muttered to myself. Only death awaits them. But even as my thoughts burned with hatred, a strange unease settled in my chest. For a brief moment, I caught my reflection in the side mirror of the vehicle. My eyes, once full of life as a young girl in Raqqa, now looked hollow, almost unrecognizable. I shook my head, forcing the thought away. This was no time for weakness. I was a warrior of Allah, and this mission would prove my loyalty once and for all. I gripped my rifle tighter and focused on the road ahead, unaware that my life was about to change forever. As our convoy sped across Deir ez-Zor, I had no idea what waited on that dusty road. The desert night was eerily quiet as our convoy raced across the rough road leading out of Deir ez-Zor. I sat in the lead vehicle, my hands gripping my rifle tightly, my eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. My men followed closely behind, their vehicles kicking up clouds of dust that seemed to hang in the air like a shroud. The silence was only broken by the low hum of our engines and the occasional muttered prayers from the driver. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. My mind was filled with visions of Al-Qaryatayn's destruction, of churches reduced to rubble, and Christians falling to their knees before our rifles. I thought of the glory that awaited us, the praise I would receive from the caliphate leaders. But deep down, an unexplainable unease tugged at my chest, like a faint whisper I refused to hear. It happened in an instant. One moment, we were speeding across the flat desert terrain, and the next, a deafening blast tore through the air. The front of our vehicle lifted violently as a wave of fire and shrapnel engulfed us. I felt my body thrown sideways, my head slamming against the window as the world around me erupted in chaos. Screams of my fighters filled my ears, mingling with the sound of twisting metal and crackling flames. The vehicle flipped, landing hard on its roof before skidding to a stop. The heat was unbearable, searing my skin as thick black smoke choked the air. I tried to move, but pain shot through every part of my body, and a bitter taste of blood filled my mouth. My last thought before the darkness claimed me was a cold realization. We had driven straight into a minefield. When I opened my eyes, everything felt strange. The pain was gone, replaced by a lightness in my body. I floated above the wreckage, looking down at the scene below with a surreal detachment. I saw my own body lying twisted among the ruins of the vehicle, my black scarf torn and bloodied, my skin blistered and charred from the flames. My fighters ran in panic, some trying to pull bodies from the burning cars, others screaming in confusion as more explosions went off in the distance. The smell of burning flesh and gasoline filled the air, but I felt nothing, not heat, not fear, not sorrow. It was as if I had become a spectator in my own story. Am I dead? The thought echoed in my mind, but there was no one to answer. As I hovered above the devastation, I expected peace, or maybe a sense of release. But instead, a heavy darkness began to creep in from the edges of my vision. It started as shadows slithering across the sand, then grew into a vast void that swallowed the desert, the wreckage, and even the stars above. The screams of my men faded, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed against me like a weight. I tried to move, to escape, but there was no direction, no up, no down, no light. Only endless blackness that seemed to pull me deeper with every passing moment. I was alone, utterly alone, in a place where time and space no longer existed. Then the voices began. At first, they were whispers, faint and indistinct, circling me in the darkness. But they grew louder, harsher, filled with venom and accusation. "Murderer," one voice hissed. "You killed in the name of Allah, but you never knew him." Another snarled, "Your hands are drenched in the blood of the innocent. Did you think he would not see?" The voices came from everywhere and nowhere, overlapping and echoing until they filled my head with unbearable noise. I clutched at my ears, but there was nothing to block them out. "You destroyed villages. You silenced prayers. You burned my churches." The words pierced me like knives, and for the first time in years, I felt fear. Not the fear of death, but a deep, soul-wrenching terror that I was beyond redemption. I tried to speak, to defend myself. I did it for Allah. I was serving him. I was fighting jihad. But the voices only laughed, a chilling sound that reverberated through the void. You served yourself, they said. You worshipped violence. You followed lies. Each accusation felt like a chain wrapping tighter around my spirit, pulling me further into the suffocating darkness. Images flashed before my eyes, faces of men I executed, children crying as their parents were dragged away, flames consuming churches while believers sang their final hymns. The weight of my actions pressed down on me, and for the first time, I saw them not as victories, but as horrors. The void grew colder, the silence heavier. I felt something moving in the darkness, unseen but close, circling like a predator. I wanted to cry out, but no sound left my lips. My thoughts raced in panic. Was this hell? Was this my punishment? All the verses I memorized, all the prayers I whispered, none of them came to mind now. The darkness mocked me with my own words. Where is your Allah? Why does he not save you? The chains around me tightened until I felt as if my very soul was being crushed. Despair consumed me, and I sank deeper into the void, ready to accept that this was my eternity. Then, in the suffocating void, a light appeared. The light began as a faint glow far away in the blackness, like a small star in a night sky stripped of all others. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but as I watched, it grew larger and brighter, cutting through the suffocating darkness that had held me captive. It was not the harsh light of fire or explosion, but a gentle, pure radiance that seemed alive. As it drew closer, I felt warmth spreading over me, not like the heat of flames, but like standing in the sun on a cool morning. The mocking voices fell silent, and for the first time since I entered the void, the crushing weight of despair lifted slightly. I reached toward the light instinctively, drawn by a force I couldn't explain. Though I didn't know what or who it was, my soul longed for it with an intensity that surprised me. The light enveloped me until I could no longer see the darkness. Then, out of the glow, a figure emerged, tall, radiant, clothed in pure white that shimmered like liquid gold. His face was unlike any I had ever seen. Strong yet tender, filled with a love so deep it pierced through every hardened layer of my heart. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw both truth and mercy, judgment and compassion. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I didn't need anyone to tell me who he was. Somehow I knew. It was Jesus, Isa al-Masih, as I had once heard him called, though I had always dismissed him as just a prophet. But this was no mere prophet. This was power. This was love. This was God. I wanted to look away, but his gaze held me. I felt exposed, as if every secret, every hidden sin, every act of violence I had committed was laid bare before him. Without speaking, he raised his hand, and images began to appear around us, horrifying visions of my past. I saw myself standing over the bodies of executed men, my rifle still warm from firing. I watched as I ordered the destruction of a church in Al-Qaryatayn, flames swallowing its walls while women and children screamed. I saw the Yazidi families torn apart under my command, their tears mixing with the dust as their homes were burned. Each scene played out in vivid detail, and with each one, I felt a crushing sorrow I had never allowed myself to feel before. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to look away, but there was no escape. The weight of my sins pressed on me like 1,000 stones, and I sank to my knees, trembling. I thought I was serving Allah, I whispered hoarsely, my voice breaking. I thought I was fighting for justice. Jesus spoke then, and his voice was unlike anything I had ever heard, deep, rich, and filled with authority, yet gentle enough to soothe the deepest wound. You were zealous, Layla, he said, but not for truth. You were blinded by hatred. You thought you knew God, but you never sought me, the only way to the Father. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. His words pierced me like a sword, cutting through all my defenses. I had spent my life believing I was a warrior for God, but now I saw the truth. I had been deceived, a servant not of righteousness, but of destruction. The pride, the anger, the bloodshed, it was all for nothing. Forgive me, I sobbed, collapsing fully to the ground. I didn't know. I didn't understand. My tears fell like rivers, and with each one, I felt a strange release, as if the chains I carried in the darkness were breaking apart. I felt filthy, unworthy to even look at him, but I dared to whisper again, "Please forgive me." Jesus knelt beside me, and his hand reached out to lift my chin. His touch was warm and filled with power that surged through me like living water. As our eyes met again, I felt waves of love so overwhelming I thought my heart would burst. "You are forgiven," he said softly. "You are mine." The words wrapped around me like a cloak, driving away every trace of fear and guilt. For the first time in my life, I felt whole, truly whole. The hatred, the pain, the anger, it all melted away in his presence. Then he stood and extended his hand toward me. "It is not your time yet," he said. "You must return and tell them what you have seen. Tell them about my love. Tell them I am real." A part of me wanted to stay. I wanted to remain in that light forever, free from the weight of my past. "But I don't deserve it," I whispered. "I don't deserve another chance." He smiled, and in his eyes, I saw a grace I could never earn. "My grace is sufficient for you. Go, Layla. Go and bring others to me." Before I could speak, I felt the light begin to pull away. Panic surged in my chest. "Don't leave me," I cried. But his voice echoed softly. "I am with you always, even to the end of the age." The light faded, and the warmth was replaced by a rushing cold as I felt myself falling through the darkness once more, back toward a world I thought I had left forever. And with that, I felt myself falling back into my body. The first thing I felt was cold stone against my back. My eyelids fluttered weakly, and my lungs fought for air, each breath shallow and strained. The smell of smoke, earth, and oil filled my nostrils. Faint voices echoed around me, soft, urgent, and unfamiliar. I tried to move, but pain shot through every part of my body. Slowly, my eyes adjusted to the dim light of flickering candles placed on the dirt floor. The ceiling above was low, roughly carved from rock, and the air felt damp and heavy. Confusion washed over me. I was not in a hospital. This was no place of clean white walls and beeping machines. Instead, it was a crude underground chamber, hidden deep beneath the earth. I could hear the sound of wind howling faintly above, muffled by layers of rock and soil. As my senses sharpened, I became aware of figures moving about in the shadows. Men and women knelt around me, their faces lit by the warm glow of the candles. They whispered in hushed tones, some in Arabic, others in broken English, their hands folded in prayer. I strained to listen. "Lord Jesus," one of them murmured, "spare her life. She does not know you yet. Forgive her, Father, for she has been blinded. Show her your mercy." Another voice joined, trembling with emotion. "She came to harm us, but you spared her. Heal her body and heal her soul." A sob escaped my throat as realization struck me like a hammer. These people, Christians, had saved me. The very ones I had been on my way to kill. I wanted to scream, to tell them to stop wasting their prayers on me. But my voice was barely a whisper. "Why?" The word cracked from my dry, broken lips. A young man knelt closer, his eyes soft yet wary. "Why are you helping me?" I forced out. He hesitated, then answered simply, "Because Jesus loves you. And he commands us to love even our enemies." The words hung heavy in the air, cutting through the walls I had built in my heart. I felt tears stinging my eyes, hot and unrelenting, as memories of the man in white flooded back. His eyes, his voice, his touch. I could no longer deny what I had seen. But how could I face these people? How could they even bear to look at me knowing what I was? My body trembled violently as sobs racked through me. I tried to lift my hands to cover my face, but the effort sent sharp pain coursing through my arms. "You don't understand," I whispered hoarsely, my voice breaking. "I came to kill you. I planned your destruction. I was an ISIS commander." I let out a choked cry. "My hands are stained with your people's blood." Silence fell. I expected gasps, maybe anger, even hatred, but there was none. Instead, one of the women, older and with lines of suffering etched into her face, reached out and gently placed a damp cloth on my forehead. "We know who you are," she said softly. "We saw your face in our nightmares, but also in our prayers. And yet, Jesus told us to rescue you. We obeyed him." Their kindness broke me completely. I wept like a child, sobbing until my chest hurt. Every act of violence I had committed replayed in my mind. The raids, the executions, the cries of the innocent. And for the first time, I felt their full weight crushing my soul. "I don't deserve this," I cried. "I don't deserve your mercy. I don't deserve his mercy." The young man beside me shook his head. "None of us deserve it. That's why it's called grace. Jesus forgives even the worst of sinners. He forgave us, he can forgive you too." His words pierced my heart, stirring something I thought was long dead. I closed my eyes and saw him again. The man in white, his arms outstretched, his eyes filled with a love so pure it terrified me. His voice echoed in my mind, "You are mine." With trembling lips, I whispered I saw him. I saw Jesus. A few of them gasped softly, but no one interrupted. "He spoke to me," I continued, tears streaming freely. "He showed me what I've done. He forgave me. He said it's not my time yet. He told me to tell the world." My voice cracked and I sobbed uncontrollably. The older woman took my burned, bandaged hand and held it tightly. "Then let him in fully," she said gently. "You have seen him. Now surrender to him. Give him your heart, and he will make it new." My lips trembled as I whispered, "But how? I don't know how." She smiled through her tears. "Just speak to him. He's listening." I drew a shuddering breath, every nerve in my broken body crying out, and whispered words I never imagined I could say. "Jesus, I'm sorry. Forgive me. My life is yours. Change me. Save me." A wave of warmth and peace washed over me, unlike anything I had ever felt. It was as if a heavy burden had been lifted from my chest. The chains that had bound me all my life fell away in an instant. For the first time in my existence, I felt clean, whole, and free. The Christians wept with me, some raising their hands in gratitude to God. I looked into their faces and no longer saw enemies. I saw brothers and sisters. The hatred that had fueled me for years was gone, replaced by a love I could not explain. I was no longer the Black Widow of Raqqa. I was simply Layla, a sinner saved by grace. For the first time, I felt truly alive. The weeks that followed were unlike anything I had ever known. I remained in that underground hiding place, surrounded by the same Christians I had once vowed to destroy. They nursed my wounds with simple herbal remedies, changed my bandages with gentle hands, and prayed over me daily. My body healed slowly, but my spirit healed even faster. Every day they read from the Bible, teaching me about Jesus, about his sacrifice, his forgiveness, and his love for all people, even those like me who had walked in darkness. For the first time in my life, I no longer felt the need to prove myself or fight for approval. I found peace sitting in the dim candlelight as they sang hymns softly, their voices echoing through the stone walls of our shelter. Each word felt like water on parched ground. My old identity, The Black Widow of Raqqa was fading away. In its place, a new Layla was being born. As I regained strength, I began helping in small ways, carrying supplies, preparing food, and even joining in their prayers. At first, I felt unworthy to lift my voice alongside theirs, but they reminded me that I was a new creation in Christ. The shame that had once bound me loosened its grip. I started memorizing verses from the Bible, much as I had once memorized verses of the Quran. But these words brought life instead of rage. If anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation, one verse said, and I clung to it with all my heart. I still struggled with nightmares of my past, the screams, the blood, the faces of those I had harmed. But every time I woke trembling, I felt Jesus whispering in my soul, "I have forgiven you. You are mine." Those words gave me courage to keep going. Months passed, and news from the outside world trickled into our underground refuge. One evening, a young man returned from a food run with a grim expression. He handed the leader of the Christian group a folded paper. I watched as the man read silently, his brow furrowed. Then he looked at me with sorrow in his eyes. "Layla," he said softly, "they know." My stomach sank. "ISIS?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He nodded. "Word of your conversion has spread. They have issued a fatwa, an order for your execution. You are marked for death as an apostate." My heart pounded in my chest, but strangely I felt no fear. I remembered the words Jesus had spoken to me in the void. "You must return and tell them what you have seen." If he had brought me back, he would protect me or take me home when the time was right. But the Christians were deeply concerned. "They will come for you, Layla," one of the women said. "We cannot let them find you here. It will endanger everyone." Plans were made quickly. They would help me escape across the border into Lebanon, where a network of underground believers could hide me. The thought of leaving the people who had become my family broke my heart, but I knew it was necessary. On a moonless night, I was dressed in plain clothes and guided through back roads and rough terrain by two men who risked their lives for me. My injuries still ached with every step, but I pressed on, whispering prayers for strength. When we finally reached the border, I turned back one last time and whispered, "Thank you, Jesus, for saving me." In Lebanon, I found refuge among other Christians who had fled persecution. They welcomed me as a sister, and I began to share my testimony in secret gatherings. At first, I was terrified to speak. What if they judged me for my past? But every time I told my story, of hatred turned to love, of darkness turned to light, I saw tears in the eyes of those listening. Some who had doubted the power of Jesus found faith because of what he had done for me. Word of my transformation spread quietly through underground networks, reaching even parts of Europe and America. I received letters from people saying my story had given them hope, that they too had been lost, but now believed Jesus could save them. Today, I am no longer hiding. I live to share the truth that set me free. I have traveled to places I never dreamed of, standing before crowds, telling them about the man in white who met me in the darkness. I speak to Muslims, Christians, and anyone who will listen. Some hate me for leaving Islam. Others threaten my life, just as I once threatened others. But I am not afraid. The same Jesus who pulled me out of the void walks with me every step of the way. I have been given a second chance, and I will not waste it. I was once an instrument of death. Now I live to tell you, Jesus is the truth. Will you answer him today?